This lecture is going to be about OpenStreetMap. So what is it? Well, it's not software. It's a data project, a collaborative data project to create a free and editable map of the world. So you can think of it as the Wikipedia of cartography, or it kind of also falls into this new category people call neo-geography, new things we're doing with maps in the modern world. And anyone can contribute to OpenStreetMap, and the URL is at the bottom of the slide, openstreetmap.org. So again, this is open geodata. And you might be wondering why. There's a lot of free base maps out there. You're familiar with Google and Yahoo and Bing. But these only give you limited rights of use. And this is where OpenStreetMap comes in, because it gives users rights to any kind of reproduction or processing, just like you get with an open licensed software. It's licensed under a license called the Creative Commons license, which is typically used for data products. So you can think of it as Wikipedia plus people out there with GPS units to create all the data in OpenStreetMap. That's a simplified view. If you go to openstreetmap.org, you'll first see the standard map. This is zoomed into Albuquerque, so I typed Albuquerque into the search box. It zooms me in there. And this is just kind of a standard view of the OpenStreetMap data. And the data itself is stored in a database, and so there's several base maps that highlight different components of the data in the database. There's also a cycle map focused on cycling routes, one that's just focused generally on transportation, including, airports and railroads and vehicular traffic. And there's a humanitarian map. So the way this all gets created is that people like you and me gather location data across the globe from a lot of different sources. So it can be going around your neighborhood recording data with a GPS device. Or you may upload public domain data into the OpenStreetMap database. So for example, in the US, one of the best freely available sources for roads data is the US Census Tiger Roads. And so that was used initially to populate OpenStreetMap in the States with all the road data. You can also digitize against free satellite imagery. So for example, you might zoom into your neighborhood and digitize the footprint of your house against satellite imagery. So all this information gets uploaded into OpenStreetMap's central database, and from there it can be further modified and corrected by anyone who notices missing facts or tags or errors about the data. And so this leads to things like mapping parties, where regular citizens can get together and start mapping their neighborhood. And the tools are simple enough to use that you don't really have to be a GIS specialist. This is something you could even do with your family. Most people, you could show how to do this, in 20 or 30 minutes. So you get citizens mapping with GPS, on bike, on foot, mapping their communities. One of the real nice features of OpenStreetMap is all the humanitarian uses. So in a lot of third world countries, for example, Google Maps is essentially blank. And so the nice thing about OpenStreetMaps being editable is that people can go in and fill in that missing data. So the OpenStreetMap team has a separate kind of division called the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team. And this is usually tied to humanitarian disaster relief efforts, such as big hurricanes or earthquakes or droughts or anything like that. Usually under the guidance of an organization like the Red Cross or something, humanitarian mappers will go to an area that is being affected by some kind of disaster and sit there and start fleshing out the map so that people can figure out where clinics are, where resources are, how to get around from camp to camp and things like that. There's another organization called Missing Maps, which is another kind of umbrella organization that tries to, again, get people to start filling in the map where there are big gaps, which is mostly third world countries. It leads to things called Mapathons. So in September, when I was in the Netherlands, we had this big class of students from 25 different countries, and so we thought one night we'd host a Mapathon, and have all the students and other people from the community participate in this. And so we went to the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap page, and they have special areas that are highlighted and recommended for people to start mapping. And so we picked a location in Nigeria, and we had everybody just start populating the map with that while eating Turkish pizzas here. And so I think over 2 hours, we mapped several thousand features as a group. And this really it can be incredibly important. So here we have a map of Nepal, and we have the road network. And during the 2015 earthquake there, you can see how the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team going in and fleshing out the map really filled in the map. You can see what the focus area where they worked and how much more detail they were able to create in a pretty short period of time. Another example of this is the big earthquake in Haiti a couple years ago. So here is what the basic OpenStreetMap base map looked like before the earthquake hit. And it's pretty bare bones, a couple buildings, a couple roads. So over a couple weeks, humanitarian mappers started filling this in and identifying where, camps where people had been, whose houses had been destroyed, where they're located, where clinics are located, and just how to get around town so that everyone could navigate and find resources and help out. And you can see it gets even more and more fleshed out. So this is really a powerful component of OpenStreetMap, is how quickly a fairly small team of people can come in and just populate the map, which isn't possible with Google Maps and other things. So this also leads to this hashtag MapTime event. This is kind of a global organic activity, and it's usually centered around OpenStreetMap, though it doesn't have to be. So for example, in Albuquerque, there is a monthly Mapathon every second Wednesday from 6 to 8 p.m. at the Bow and Arrow Brewery, and you can go to meetup.com to find out more about that. And that's focused not really on humanitarian work necessarily, but in fleshing out the OpenStreetMap data for Albuquerque. So who's using OpenStreetMap? There's a lot of big companies. So Uber and Lyft, for example, use it in their apps, as does Snapchat and Foursquare and Strava. And then Craigslist uses it as well. TripAdvisor, Weather Underground, Wikipedia. There's a lot of even news outlets that are using it these days. And like anything, people need to have conferences, right? So there are conferences around OpenStreetMap. Every year there's a State of the Map conference globally, and there's also a State of the Map for the US. So this is the US State of the Map conference picture from last month. And it's just people getting together who are interested in using or developing tools around OpenStreetMap, getting together and talking about that. So this is a slide that just shows how OpenStreetMap has grown over the years. So you can see the number of registered users. So when you go to openstreetmap.org, you can sign up for a free account. So this shows the number of registered users from 2005 up until fairly recently. So we almost are getting close to 5 million registered OpenStreetMap users. This shows the editing history, and we'll get into what nodes and ways are, but basically points and lines in the database and how many of those have been added through time. So you can see how the map is just steadily growing. So one question you might have is, how accurate or complete is it? Well, it uses this wiki style process, so there isn't a guarantee of accuracy of any kind. But then again, most proprietary base maps don't carry a guarantee of accuracy either, and you've probably noticed that there are errors in routing in Google Maps too. So there are new roads being built all the time, so any base map is going to have some issues with currency, and OpenStreetMaps is no different. One interesting thing about proprietary maps is that they will include intentional errors in the data called Easter eggs, and these are there basically to allow them to catch people who are violating their licensing terms. With OpenStreetMap, though, all the users have a stake in having accurate data. So if one person puts in inaccurate data maliciously or otherwise, the other 99% of the people can check it and fix it and get rid of it, which happens. And it's very rare for something malicious to happen to the data. So your mileage may vary, though. If you're familiar with Wikipedia, and I think that's shown that a large amount of good quality information can be collected by a community, but you still have to weed out inevitable errors, and you have to be the thinking component of using this. You have to judge it like any other data set and see if it works for you. One of the nice things about OpenStreetMap is that it has a full editing history. So you can go in and see when a feature was last updated and who did that. So that's really a nice open aspect of it. So the best way to judge whether it's going to work for you is to just start working with it and see if the data is complete enough and if it includes the features and things that you need or not. So the data itself is stored, well, when you download it in smaller pieces, it will be downloaded as an OSM file, which is an XML format. And it will include nodes, which are points, and ways, which are lines and can also form polygons, and then attributes. And in OpenStreetMap, things basically get tagged as being a building or a road or something like that. So the tags, there's a OpenStreetMap coffee mug you can get that has a lot of the common tags. So if you're editing and having a cup of coffee, you have all the useful ones right there. But they're basically key value pairs. So you can see on the mug, amenity is one basic kind of feature, and then amenity might be tagged with restaurant or cafe or shelter or ATM or bank. So you see how that works. You can basically tag items with whatever descriptions that you need. So the most basic kind of data in the database are points, which get called nodes, just identified by a pair of coordinates. Like all data in OpenStreetMap, points will have a timestamp of the last edit, the user ID of who made that change, and every change, also every edit or change, gets a change set ID number assigned to it in the database. So this editing history is there for every feature in the database. So points are used for things that are best represented as points, such as store locations or clinics and things like that. There are also ways, which is just another way of saying nodes connected by a line or line data. So ways are essentially lines in OpenStreetMap. And again, they're going to have all the editing history and tags that identify what those are. And if the first and last nodes of a way are the same spot, it closes on itself and forms a polygon. So in the database, that's how polygons are stored. And there's a lot of creative tools out there and ways that people are using the data in OpenStreetMap. This is a shot of some 3D building footprints that someone built against the OpenStreetMap building footprint data. So OpenStreetMap can be used as a base map, but it is also a data set of features that you can use. And so there's different ways to edit it. There's some online editing tools that you can use from the OpenStreetMap site. There's also an offline editor if you're going to be out of network connectivity. And there are even this code. The Leaflet is a common web mapping API, and there is code in Leaflet for setting up tools in an online mapping application that would let you edit in OpenStreetMap. And there's even a mobile app for OpenStreetMap called OpenMaps. So this is the OpenStreetMap website, and I've logged in. My handle is GeoMenke, and I'm using the Potlatch in-browser editor, which is the most common way to edit. And when you zoom into an area, you'll be shown a base map, which is a aerial photograph or a satellite image, and then you can start digitizing. So here I've digitized a building footprint, and I can then go over here and tag it as a specific kind of feature, which can include the address and things like that. And you can see up here it's possible to digitize a point, line, or area. This shows the history tab in OpenStreetMap, and you can see that the housing footprint that I just digitized is listed as a change set in that area, and you can see that there are other users have done other edits in the region. So anywhere you're zoomed into, you can see all the editing history. And as I mentioned, it's not just for, it's a really nice base map, but OpenStreetMap can also be a data source for a project. If you need roads or building footprints or points of interest of some kind, OpenStreetMap can be a source of that. So you can download data by a couple different QGIS plugins. You can also use an ArcGIS toolbox. And these are for limited areas, not large areas like a state or a country. If you need larger areas, you can go to Planet OSM and you can download the entire database in one piece. You can also go to, there's some providers like GeoFabric that provide kind of pre-stage extracts out of the OpenStreetMap data for major metropolitan areas and small countries and things like that. And Metro Extracts is crossed out because it was similar to GeoFabric but went out of business last year. So hopefully that something comes to replace that because it was very handy. So if you're going to download this as data, it will come in as an OSM file if you're using one of the QGIS plugins, for example, and that's an XML format. And QGIS can read OSM files immediately. It's a little more work to get them into ArcGIS. PBF is the format that you would get if you downloaded a larger area from Planet OSM. And so that's a binary file that's better suited to larger downloads. So this is back on the OpenStreetMap website. We've looked at editing and history, and here we're on the export tab. So you can also download data directly from the OpenStreetMap website when you have a login. And it's going to be, again, a limited area. It's going to be for kind of a neighborhood or part of a town, but certainly not a whole state or a country. It would be too large to download. But for smaller areas, you can download it right on the website. So the plugins that are useful in QGIS for working with OpenStreetMap are Quick OSM and OSM Tools. Those are the two main ones. There's a couple of others. And these allow you to download data using this API called Overpass that lets you specify tags for what you want. So you can specify just highways or just building footprints or just clinics or something like that. And you've probably seen this already, but if you're looking at the Quick Map Services options, there is an OSM entry at the bottom of the menu, and there's 10 or 12 different base maps based on the OpenStreetMap database available. It's also available as a base map in ArcGIS. And there are some other OpenGeo data projects. There's actually an opengeodata.org website, which is a new project by the US government to catalog open geodata that's federal. There's an OpenStreetMap Street View project, which is similar to Street View and Google Maps, but with this, instead of the Google car driving down the street and taking all the pictures, you can take your own Street View pictures and upload them into the database. There's Open Aerial Map and Open Drone Map, both of which allow you to upload aerial photography that you've flown with a drone into those databases. Open Weather Map, Open GeoPortal, and NASA Whirlwind. So there's a lot of other open geodata projects that you should, you can Google and explore those if you want. So in terms of resources for OpenStreetMap, just from the OpenStreetMap website, there's a help page, which is pretty thorough. And it also includes a beginner's guide. So if you want to just figure out how to get started editing, all the information will be there. There's also a wiki that gives you other details about the project itself. Planet OSM, where you can download the entire database. And OpenStreetMap does have a Twitter account, so you can follow them on Twitter and get updates. And this book I'll bring in next week, OpenStreetMap by Frederick Rahm, is a pretty, nice inch and a half thick book on OpenStreetMap, how to use the tools and the data around OpenStreetMap. So I'll bring that in so you can have a look. So OpenStreetMap is a great resource. It's both a base map and a data source for you. And it's especially useful in areas that have not been fully mapped yet. So you can both have a community crowd-sourced campaign to map an area, and then everyone can download that and use the data. So it's a fantastic open data project.